Men rise from one ambition to another. First, they seek to secure themselves against attack, and then they attack others. Machiavelli.
Every empire, every corporation, every revolution, and every small circle of influence revolves around a single gravitational body, a person, not an idea. You can dress it in banners, anthems, and creeds, but beneath the facade lies a truth too uncomfortable for most to admit. People do not follow beliefs, they follow other people who embody those beliefs. Take that figure away and you discover how fragile loyalty really is. The human herd has always needed a shepherd. Without one, it does not disperse in peace. It panics, fragments, and tears itself apart. The historian who studies collapse will often search for economic reasons, natural disasters, or foreign invasions. Yet if you look carefully, you will find the same pattern repeating like a pulse. A single death, an exile, a fall from grace, and then chaos. The assassination of a general ends a rebellion. The resignation of a CEO wipes billions in market value. The death of a prophet splinters faith into 100 sects. The structure never collapses from below. It collapses from the removal of the central force that gives it meaning. The shepherd disappears, and the sheep scatter. Human nature has not evolved past this need for leadership. Whether we wear crowns or badges, hold smartphones or swords, we still orbit those who radiate certainty. A charismatic leader, a defiant rebel, a powerful mentor. Each acts as a stabilizing axis for the uncertain. They become the emotional and strategic spine of a collective psyche. Their followers are not united by shared logic, but by the magnetic force of identification. He understands me. She represents what I wish to be. Remove that mirror and self-definition collapses. What remains is confusion, suspicion, and eventually, betrayal. Power at its essence is not a collection of laws or armies. It is the ability to create emotional alignment among others. The shepherd achieves this not by herding with whips, but by standing as the image of unity. Even his silence carries meaning. When Richelieu moved through the French court, nobles would pause mid-sentence, reading his expression like scripture. When Lenin spoke in Petrograd, he did not need to command obedience. His mere conviction gave men purpose. This is the gravity of leadership, an invisible pull that keeps orbiters in motion. But gravity, though invisible, is fragile. Once disturbed, it unravels everything it held together. The most dangerous moment for any movement is not when enemies attack from without, but when the heart of the movement weakens within. When a leader hesitates, ages, falls ill, or loses credibility, the faithful begin to look at each other differently. The same men who swore eternal loyalty begin whispering doubts. The same crowds that cheered start debating alternatives. History shows that power is never truly seized by violence first. It is seized by psychological dislocation. When followers cease to believe that the shepherd still knows the way, the shepherd is already dead in spirit. Consider the structure of any successful group. A company, a government, a social movement. The larger the organization grows, the more invisible the dependence becomes. The systems appear to run themselves, meetings, policies, routines. Yet beneath this apparent order, there is always a hidden personality whose energy sustains it. The founder whose vision everyone imitates. The general whose courage shames his subordinates into action. The patriarch or matriarch whose presence keeps rivals at bay. They are the invisible axis around which chaos pretends to be order. And because they are invisible, most never realize how vulnerable their stability truly is. When that axis falters, the decay spreads faster than anyone expects. A leader is not removed in one stroke. He is eroded by rumor, by fatigue, by distance, by the slow corrosion of authority. Once that aura fades, followers begin to test boundaries. They stop listening to orders in the same way. They interpret silence as weakness. A court once united around a monarch begins to split into factions. A company built on a visionary's charisma turns into a bureaucratic battlefield. A revolution led by a prophet devolves into infighting among disciples, each claiming to be the true heir. The fall of the shepherd releases 1,000 miniature egos into competition. Why does this happen so quickly? Because loyalty is rarely to the cause itself. It is to the person who makes the cause feel alive. Remove the person and what remains is ideology without heart. Ideology alone cannot sustain emotion. It only justifies it. Without an emotional anchor, people default to self-interest. The more intelligent among them will rationalize betrayal as pragmatism. The rest will simply follow whoever promises safety. In this way, loyalty is always conditional. It survives only as long as the shepherd's shadow stretches over the flock. If you wish to control a crowd, never attack the crowd directly. It will only unify in self-defense. Attack instead the heart they share, the figure that holds their imagination together. You do not confront thousands of minds. You unseat the one that commands them. History's most cunning tacticians understood this law instinctively. When Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he did not plan to fight the entire Roman Senate. He sought to dismantle its spiritual nucleus, Pompey the Great. When Pompey fled, the Senate's resistance dissolved into chaos. Caesar had not defeated Rome, he had removed its shepherd. When Richelieu wanted to neutralize rebellion among France's nobles, he didn't waste time arresting their followers. He isolated their patrons and watched entire networks disintegrate overnight. Even in modern times, when a regime wishes to destroy dissent, it does not censor every voice. It silences the one voice others follow. The principle holds across every hierarchy. In gangs, remove the leader and infighting begins. In corporations, remove the founder and confusion multiplies. In families, remove the patriarch or matriarch and unspoken rivalries erupt. This is not a flaw of character, but a law of organization. Human beings, by nature, seek authority figures not because they love submission, but because they crave certainty. Certainty is rare, and those who project it become the subconscious anchor for those adrift. This is why even powerful individuals, generals, executives, politicians, cling to mentors and advisors. Everyone wants someone whose conviction is stronger than their own, but here lies the paradox. The same gravity that unites also imprisons. For the shepherd himself is trapped by his flock. The stronger his following, the narrower his freedom. He becomes a hostage of the very loyalty that empowers him. He must maintain a flawless image, for one visible crack can dissolve years of devotion. Power demands not perfection, but the illusion of it. Once that illusion breaks, fear and contempt rush in. The moment Alexander the Great's army saw his exhaustion, they murmured rebellion. The moment Napoleon began to hesitate after Russia, his marshals began plotting. It is not failure that destroys the shepherd. It is the perception of vulnerability. If you are to master this law, you must learn to see the world in terms of invisible centers of gravity. Do not be distracted by noise or numbers. Ask yourself, who holds the emotional key to this group? In every department, rebellion, or court, there is one such figure. The one whose fall would unravel the rest. Identify them, understand them, then decide whether to ally or remove them. For once the center is gone, even the mightiest structure will crumble under its own uncertainty. The art lies in subtlety. The shepherd must not realize he is being targeted until it is too late. The crowd must not see your hand in his downfall, or they will find a new shepherd in vengeance. The ideal strike is silent, appearing as destiny or self-destruction. History's best manipulators made others strike the shepherd for them. They sowed distrust, exaggerated weaknesses, and allowed nature to complete the work. The result is not rebellion, but confusion. a fog through which followers wander aimlessly until they fade. Behind every great downfall stands someone who understood this law. They did not fight chaos. They created it by removing order's core. And behind every lasting power stands someone who learned to conceal their own centrality, so that even if they fall, the flock keeps moving, unaware that the shepherd was ever gone. The Roman Republic had known wars without number, but few men in its long history ever frightened the Senate the way Spartacus did. He was not born a general. He was a slave, a gladiator who turned his cage into a classroom of freedom. What made him dangerous was not his sword, but his mind. He understood that to fight Rome was suicide, but to inspire others to fight was immortality. In the training yards of Capua, he began to see the invisible truth that terrified the patricians. The slaves were not weak. They were leaderless. Every lash of the whip, every humiliation had trained them to obey, not to unite. All it took was one man who refused to bow, and the idea of obedience itself would begin to crumble. Spartacus became that man. His escape from the gladiator school was not merely a rebellion, it was the birth of a gravitational center. Thousands followed him into the mountains, and within weeks the rebel camp had turned into a living nation. He led not as a tyrant, but as a myth. He ate beside his men, shared their hunger, fought at the front lines. To those who had never been treated as human, he became proof that dignity could be reclaimed. That faith, more than any weapon, was what made his army invincible. For 2 years they humiliated Roman legions. Entire cohorts surrendered to slaves. The Senate, humiliated before the world, realized what they were facing was not an army of men, but the orbit of one man's will. Rome's greatest fear was not defeat. It was contagion. If Spartacus lived, every slave across the empire might dream of freedom. So they stopped fighting the rebellion as a whole and turned their gaze to its nucleus. The Senate called upon Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, not because of his money, but because he understood psychology better than any general. Crassus knew he didn't need to kill every slave. He only needed to break their illusion of unity. He began with deception. He spread rumors that Spartacus planned to abandon his followers. He captured lieutenants and turned them against each other with promises of pardon. He executed every man who retreated, forcing terror to compete with loyalty. Then he built walls, not metaphorically but literally, digging trenches and erecting barriers to isolate Spartacus from supplies, communication, and morale. Slowly, starvation and suspicion replaced belief. The once roaring camps grew silent. Spartacus, realizing the trap, tried one last desperate charge to break through the Roman lines. Surrounded, he fought until he disappeared beneath the crush of shields. When the shepherd fell, the sheep scattered exactly as Crassus predicted. Tens of thousands of rebels fled into the hills. Some surrendered, some were captured. Most turned on each other. The army that once moved as one body now disintegrated into fragments of fear. Rome crucified 6,000 along the Appian Way, not merely as punishment but as theater. The message was unmistakable. The symbol is dead, and without the symbol there is no cause. The Senate celebrated its victory, yet what they had really achieved was psychological mastery. They hadn't defeated the rebellion through force, they had struck its heart. The body of the uprising lived on for a few weeks, but its soul was gone. This was the perfection of strategic cruelty. Remove the shepherd and the sheep will scatter of their own accord. What makes this story eternal is not its bloodshed, but its anatomy. Every movement is a reflection of its leader's will. As long as Spartacus lived, even Rome itself was unsure of victory. His fall was not a single death. It was the removal of the gravitational center that kept belief alive. Rome did not just conquer men. It conquered the imagination that gave them courage. From that day, The Senate understood something about human nature that future empires would imitate endlessly. You do not suppress the crowd. You isolate its voice. You do not destroy an army. You unmake its confidence. The greatest victories in history were not won by killing the most enemies, but by killing the idea that led them. Spartacus had proven that a single man's conviction could terrify an empire. Crassus proved that striking down that conviction could restore it. Centuries later, generals, politicians, and corporate strategists would repeat the same silent maneuver. Find the shepherd, remove him, and let human nature complete the work. What scattered that day on the Italian plains was not merely an army of slaves. It was the oldest illusion of humanity, that unity can survive without a center. When the shepherd falls, the silence that follows is not peace. It is disorientation. The men who once marched as one begin to ask questions they never dared to form aloud. Who are we now? What are we fighting for? The collapse of a leader is not a physical event. It is psychological implosion. It begins in the mind, spreads through language, and ends in behavior. The world has seen this pattern so many times that it almost feels like instinct, yet few truly understand it. Every group, no matter how large, is held together by invisible emotional contracts. These contracts are not signed in ink but in faith. They rest on one assumption: that someone knows the way. The leader becomes the externalized certainty of the collective. As long as he stands firm, followers can afford to doubt themselves. The moment he falters, the faith that glued them together dissolves. Loyalty, once radiant, becomes heavy with suspicion. You can almost watch it happen. The way people start to speak more cautiously, how meetings grow quieter, how each man or woman begins to retreat into self-preservation. The Romans understood this better than any psychologist ever could. They knew that a movement without its nucleus decays by its own weight. Crassus didn't need to chase every survivor of Spartacus's army. He simply watched them turn against each other. Some sought forgiveness from Rome. Others blamed their comrades for the defeat. The same men who once shouted freedom together now cursed one another in the night. Fear replaced discipline. Unity, once forged by belief, shattered under the gravity of hunger and guilt. This is how all empires restore order, not by erasing their enemies, but by letting them erase themselves once the source of cohesion disappears. You see the same dynamic centuries later in boardrooms and parliaments and revolutions. A visionary founder resigns, and the company that once called itself a family becomes a machine of politics. Factions form overnight. The engineers blame the marketers blame the executives, the investors lose faith. Each is fighting ghosts, not realizing the real loss is the gravitational pull that made them believe they were building something greater than themselves. The problem was never the product. It was the disappearance of the shepherd's certainty. This pattern extends to nations, marriages, armies, even friendships. Every circle of trust revolves around one figure who provides emotional direction. Remove that figure and you unmask the truth. Most loyalty is circumstantial, not moral. People are not bound to each other by virtue but by shared confidence in leadership. When confidence dies, morality follows. Betrayal becomes a rational act of survival. In this sense, collapse is rarely external. It doesn't come from invasion or defeat. It seeps from within, like rot beneath polished marble. A leader's hesitation, a public misstep, a rumor of weakness. These are enough to destabilize entire systems. In ancient courts, even the color of a monarch's expression could change the direction of politics. One look of doubt, one sigh too long, and the courtiers began whispering about succession. They were not cruel. They were merely human, recalibrating their allegiance to the next rising sun. The true anatomy of collapse begins with whispers. A joke at the leader's expense, a private letter misread, an ally's subtle absence. Those who once stood nearest start to drift away, not with rebellion but with politeness. They avoid confrontation, tell themselves they are being practical, and step aside just far enough to avoid the fall. Soon the leader looks around and realizes that the echo of loyalty has replaced loyalty itself. The hall is still full, but no one is listening. This is why the fall of great figures feels so sudden, because decay is invisible until it is complete. By the time power realizes it is alone, it has already been hollowed out from the inside. The shepherd sees the flock in the distance and believes they still follow, not realizing they are grazing elsewhere. What Spartacus faced on the battlefield is what every leader faces in spirit. The slow erosion of unity once fear and fatigue replace conviction. Crassus merely accelerated what time would have done eventually. And yet, from the perspective of power, this is not tragedy but inevitability. Leadership is entropy resisted by personality. The moment that resistance ends, nature reclaims what charisma built. Look deeper and you will see that collapse has stages. First comes confusion, the disorientation after the leader's fall. Then fragmentation, new leaders emerging, each claiming legitimacy. Then exhaustion, the followers, weary of uncertainty, surrender to the strongest or the nearest authority. In the end, the group either dissolves or reforms around a new shepherd. Power, like energy, is never lost. It only transfers its center. This is why history often replaces one tyranny with another. When the first shepherd falls, the sheep do not find freedom. They merely seek a new staff to follow. The French Revolution killed its king only to raise new emperors. The Soviet people buried one tyrant to worship another. The pattern is merciless. Destroy the idol and you do not destroy belief. You release it into chaos until it finds a new object. For those who understand this, collapse is no longer mystery but mechanism. You can watch it unfold and even guide it. To destroy a movement, do not confront it directly. Isolate its leader, discredit him, surround him with doubt. The flock will finish the job for you. And if you are wise, you will do it without leaving fingerprints. The art of power is not in striking hard, but in making the strike look like fate. At its deepest level, collapse is an emotional event masquerading as politics. What falls first is not the army, not the institution, but belief itself. The belief that someone somewhere knows what they are doing. Once that illusion fades, even the strongest structures crumble like sand. People will tell themselves they are rational, but what they really are is frightened. They seek order. They seek someone to tell them who they are. When that voice disappears, they scatter. Not because they want to, but because they no longer know where to stand. And so the law reveals its truth in every age. Strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter, not because they are weak, but because they are human. Remove the one who embodies certainty, and certainty itself dies. What remains is noise, drifting silence, until a new center forms and the cycle begins again. The true masters of power never waste their strength on the crowd. They understand that energy is precious, and chaos multiplies when struck at the wrong point. To control or destroy any system, political, corporate, spiritual, or social, you must first locate its pulse. And that pulse is almost never found where the noise is loudest. It hides behind the curtain, in the person whose confidence the others feed upon. They might not hold the highest title, but they hold the invisible center. Strike that center and the rest falls by gravity alone. The powerful have always been students of human geometry. They map influence the way astronomers map stars, tracing constellations of loyalty, dependency, and fear. They listen not to speeches, but to silences. Who do people wait for before speaking? Whose opinion shifts the tone of the room? Who can say less and mean more? The answers reveal where the shepherd stands. Once identified, everything else is detail. The art of striking lies not in force, but in precision. Amateurs attack the crowd and end up uniting it. Professionals remove the person who gives it direction. The generals who crushed Spartacus understood this, as did Richelieu, as did Cromwell, and every politician who has quietly destroyed a rival without lifting a sword. The moment you make the leader the target, the rest become disoriented. The leader's fall transforms the collective's strength into suspicion. Allies begin to test loyalties. Even the faithful, left without orders, start interpreting silence as weakness. The group dissolves not through defeat, but through interpretation. In the corporate world, this principle plays out in elegant disguise. Competitors don't always destroy companies by attacking their products. They isolate the founder, undermine the visionary, make investors question their leadership. Suddenly, the board grows restless, the culture loses energy, and the entire organism implodes from within. The brand might survive, but the spirit dies. The company becomes a shell, directionless, moving out of habit rather than purpose. The shepherd has been struck, and no one dares to lead the flock again. The same method governs politics. You need not topple a government to destroy it. Discredit the figure who symbolizes stability, and the country will devour itself in debate. The Romans understood this when they spread rumors about foreign kings. Modern governments do the same with disinformation, scandals, or the slow erosion of credibility. It is never the first accusation that kills, it is the accumulation of doubt. Once people doubt the shepherd, no order will hold them. They scatter in search of a new truth, or worse, turn against one another. There is an even subtler way to strike, not through scandal or violence, but through imitation. Copy the shepherd so precisely that the flock begins to confuse your voice with his. This is psychological dismemberment. It divides attention, creates two centers where there should be one. Soon, loyalty fractures. Some follow you, some remain with him, but both sides weaken. When a movement has two shepherds, it has none. History is full of revolutions that failed because someone mimicked the leader's tone just enough to create doubt. Duplication is the silent assassination of authority. Timing, however, is everything. To strike too early is to martyr the shepherd. To strike too late is to face a hardened legend. The ideal moment is when the leader's authority begins to waver but has not yet collapsed. Then, a small push, a rumor, a withdrawal of support, a well-timed absence, sends the entire edifice trembling. The followers will believe the fall was natural, even inevitable. The best strike is one that looks like self-destruction. Crassus did not kill Spartacus alone. He let hunger and paranoia do it for him. The modern strategist does the same. Sets events in motion, lets fatigue and vanity play their part, and steps in only to deliver the final merciful blow. But the wise do not only strike, they defend. For there will come a day when you are the shepherd, and the eyes of others will follow you. The same laws that destroy leaders also threaten you. To survive, you must make yourself impossible to strike. How? By dispersing the center, by building layers of loyalty, ambiguity, and self-reliance around you. The more visible your importance, the easier it is to target you. A good leader hides behind systems, not charisma. They let their presence be felt, but not located. When the enemy comes to strike, they find only smoke. The shepherd has become the fog itself. This is the paradox of power. Visibility creates vulnerability. The brightest star is the easiest to aim at. Those who understand this move strategically. They share credit, delegate decisions, allow others to seem indispensable. By doing so, they blur the target. Their authority becomes a network, not a point. And when rivals attempt to strike, they discover that cutting one thread does not collapse the web. The greatest leaders are never killed. They are never found. At times, it is wiser not to remove a shepherd outright, but to replace the flock's perception of him. Feed them a new symbol, one that speaks louder to their desires. You do not kill the old authority, you outshine it. This is psychological substitution, the peaceful assassination of influence. Religions, empires, and corporations all use it. They do not erase the old, they reframe it, making people forget it ever had power. Memory is the softest target in the war for dominance. And yet, no matter how skillfully you manipulate, remember that every strike unleashes chaos. The moment the shepherd falls, uncertainty fills the air, and uncertainty always attracts opportunists. You must be ready to fill the void before others do. The same speed that kills must also rebuild. After you strike, move swiftly. Create a new center before the crowd invents one. Power hates emptiness. If you do not become the new shepherd, someone else will. This law, cruel as it sounds, is not about violence. It is about understanding the architecture of influence. Leadership is not equality, it is hierarchy disguised as unity. People gather under a name, a cause, a vision, but they remain bound to the personality that defines it. The removal of that personality is like removing the sun from a solar system. Planets drift into darkness. What you witness afterward is not evil. It is gravity obeying its laws. In this way, every strike is both a killing and a revelation. It exposes the hidden dependency that the crowd refused to acknowledge. It shows that belief without embodiment cannot survive. The shepherd is not the enemy of the flock. He is their reflection. When you strike him, you are not merely scattering sheep. You are revealing how human beings fear their own freedom. The more you rise, the more invisible the knives become. Leadership, for all its glory, is a target painted in gold. Every eye that admires you also measures your distance from the ground. Those who once praised your light begin to wonder what it would feel like to stand where you stand. Power invites gravity. It pulls devotion upward and resentment down. To survive, a leader must learn to live with both. The mistake most shepherds make is believing that love protects them. Love is loyal only while it is fed. It feeds on confidence, success, and the sense that you are still moving forward. The moment you falter, affection mutates into analysis. People study your weaknesses the way they once studied your words. Their minds, once synchronized with yours, begin to work independently, and independence is the first step toward rebellion. If you rule by admiration alone, your throne is made of paper. To endure, you must build something stronger than emotion, structure, systems, rituals, chains of command. These are the bones that survive when flesh decays. Create a framework that operates even in your absence. A leader who ties everything to personal presence is already half defeated. When you are the only one who can give orders, solve problems, or provide direction, your downfall is inevitable. The most enduring powers are those that make themselves dispensable. They lead not through dependence, but through design. Yet detachment alone is not safety. You must also manage perception. The enemy rarely strikes the shepherd himself, they strike the idea of the shepherd. The surest defense, therefore, is ambiguity. Let no one know exactly how much power you possess or where it truly lies. Move between visibility and shadow. Speak occasionally, but not predictably. Allow others to underestimate your reach. When power is difficult to measure, it becomes difficult to destroy. Some of history's longest-lasting leaders mastered this camouflage. They created councils, factions, and layers of authority so complex that no enemy could find the true center. They encouraged rivalry among subordinates so that no alliance could form strong enough to unseat them. They played weakness as strategy, pretending to yield, allowing others to believe they were in control, only to remind them later who had allowed their rise. The safest shepherd is the one who looks ordinary until the moment of decision. If the strike does come, and it always does, the wise leader accepts it as inevitable. No position of power is permanent, it is rented from time. What matters is how you fall and what survives after you do. If you have prepared your legacy, your ideas and systems will outlive you. The foolish leader clings to life, the cunning one prepares succession. You must create heirs not of blood but of belief. People who continue your direction even when they think they are creating their own. In this way, you become immortal without needing to be present. But there is a deeper, quieter form of defense that few practice. Humility as disguise. The more powerful you become, the more you must appear uninterested in power. This disarms envy before it sharpens. Pretend fatigue, invite others to lead minor battles, yield credit easily. People rarely strike those who seem already subdued. They prefer opponents who radiate victory. When you dim your own brightness, you can move unseen through dangerous rooms. Never forget that every group eventually tires of its shepherd. The longer you lead, the more you symbolize their limits. What began as inspiration becomes familiarity, and familiarity breeds contempt. The crowd always seeks renewal. It cannot stand the stillness of stability. The greatest leaders learn to withdraw before they are pushed. They retreat at the height of their influence, leaving behind an image of strength instead of the spectacle of decline. In doing so, they deny their enemies the satisfaction of striking. The shepherd who vanishes willingly cannot be scattered. Control your narrative before others do. If you must fall, fall deliberately, as a gesture, not as a consequence. When the world believes you stepped down by choice, it forgets to celebrate your defeat. The true artist of power understands that perception is reality's armor. And yet, all defenses aside, the leader who survives longest is the one who never fully believes in their own myth. Power intoxicates those who confuse the echo for the voice. When applause becomes constant, it deafens the mind to danger. The moment you start to think that the flock needs you more than you need them, you have already begun to die. The humility to see yourself as replaceable is paradoxically what keeps you irreplaceable. So when the shadows lengthen and the air around you grows tense with whispers, remember this. You cannot stop others from striking, but you can make sure that when they do, nothing truly shatters. A shepherd who built wisely leaves behind not chaos but continuity. The flock may scatter for a moment, but they will return to the path he carved even without his hand to guide them. And that is the final mastery. Not merely to hold power, but to design its survival. To understand that every shepherd is temporary, every crowd fickle, every light destined to fade. But those who see the pattern clearly, who build systems instead of thrones, who cultivate successors instead of worshippers, become something rarer than leaders. They become architects of order itself. For in the end, power is not about commanding others. It is about shaping the gravity that commands them even when you are gone. The weak fight to remain visible. The wise work to make their influence invisible, so that when they disappear, the world continues to move as if they were still there. That is the art of being the shepherd who can never be struck, because he exists not as a man but as a principle. There comes a point in every age where people believe they have outgrown the need for shepherds. They say, "We are free now. We think for ourselves, but the illusion never lasts." Sooner or later, the crowd finds a new name to chant, a new voice to follow, a new pair of hands to guide them through uncertainty. For it is not freedom that people fear losing, it is direction. The human heart is not drawn to equality, it is drawn to gravity. It orbits whatever radiates certainty, even if that certainty destroys it. This is why every civilization repeats itself. The faces change, the flags change, the slogans evolve, but the structure remains. A figure rises, gathers the lost into his orbit, gives them purpose. They worship him or they hate him, but they cannot ignore him. And then, when he falls, they scatter like frightened birds, unaware that they are already searching for their next cage. Power does not corrupt humanity. Dependence does. The shepherd and the sheep need each other equally, trapped in a cycle of fear disguised as loyalty. If you watch carefully, you'll see this pattern in every corner of the modern world. A celebrity vanishes and followers turn on one another. A politician is exposed and his supporters devour each other in confusion. A corporation loses its founder and its vision evaporates overnight. We live surrounded by invisible shepherds, influencers, CEOs, prophets, executives, ideologues, each holding together a flock that believes it cannot survive without them. The irony is that both sides are right. Because once the shepherd is gone, there is no unity. Only the echo of his voice. That echo grows quieter with time, replaced by noise, replaced by hunger, replaced by the desperate call for a new name to believe in. This is not cynicism, it is anatomy. Humans cannot bear uncertainty for long. Where there is no center, they will invent one, and the wisest among them will realize that this need, the need for gravity, is the most powerful force in existence. The manipulator, the ruler, the strategist, all understand this. They do not fight the crowd's nature. They sculpt it. They allow people to believe they are free while gently guiding them with invisible hands. They let them choose among options that all lead to the same direction. The true shepherd does not command. He influences. He does not need obedience. He needs belief. And belief, once placed in him, will survive logic, evidence, even his own downfall. But the cost of such mastery is isolation. Every shepherd walks alone. His reward is not companionship, but clarity. The knowledge that the love around him is conditional, that the devotion that lifts him today will watch him fall tomorrow. The wise accept this and lead anyway. The foolish demand loyalty and perish when it fades. Leadership is not about being followed, it is about enduring solitude without losing direction. So remember this law not as cruelty but as physics. When the shepherd falls, the sheep will scatter. Not because they are weak, but because they were never united by each other. They were united by him. Remove the source and you reveal the truth. Order was only an illusion. Power's greatest lie is permanence. Its greatest test is what survives after you are gone. When history turns its gaze upon you, it will not ask whether you ruled with kindness or fear. It will ask one question. What happened when you disappeared? Did chaos rush in? Or did the world keep moving, quietly guided by the systems you left behind? That answer will decide whether you were a tyrant, a shepherd, or an architect. In the end, there is only one kind of power worth having. The power that no one can strike because no one can see it. The power woven into structure, hidden in plain sight, guiding silently through others. The shepherd who endures is not the one who commands, but the one whose influence has become nature itself. The camera fades to a silent plain. The staff lies abandoned in the grass. The sheep wander aimlessly beneath a vast, indifferent sky. And somewhere in the distance, a new shadow rises. Another voice, another promise, another center. The cycle begins again. Like, subscribe, comment, or don't. You are the master of your own life.